Hi everyone, and welcome to Return to the River, a program about life along the banks of the historic Hudson River Valley. I'm your host, Chris Bowser. In 1986, a local TV show called On the River was produced by what was then WTZA Channel 62 in Kingston, New York. The show documented life along the river and covered such topics as industrial polluters, the sloop Clearwater, the state of recreation and commercial fishing, and waterfront preservation and development. In all, 153 episodes were produced. Today, through the generous donation of its original producers, the shows reside in the Marist College archives and special collections. The concept of Return to the River is to revisit many of the topics covered by the original series and to see how life along the Hudson has changed over the last 25 years. What policies helped in its preservation and what work still needs to be done. We'll take a look at everything, from the variety of fish that inhabit its waters to the numerous historic landmarks that line its banks. The Hudson River is one of the most unique and diverse bodies of water in the world, and we still have much to learn about it. So I hope you'll join us for Return to the River. The Norrie Point Environmental Center in Staatsburg is the headquarters of the Hudson River National Estuarine Research Reserve. Each fall, their Science on the River open house attracts hundreds of local residents to learn about the latest research and stewardship projects in and around the estuary.
But first, let's take a quick look at a segment from the original On the River series.
An assortment of Hudson River fish have a new home in an 8,000-gallon aquarium at Dutchess Community College's Norrie Point Environmental Site. It's in Staatsburg, and even though there are still finishing touches to be made, one can see through accurate simulations how life exists within the Hudson River Valley. Much time, effort, and money was invested in the aquarium exhibit at the Norrie Point Environmental Site in Staatsburg, and so far about $150,000 has gone into its construction, we're told. The purpose of this exhibit is to depict life in the Hudson River Valley. After the net is unraveled, they will form a horseshoe with the attempt to lure the fish into the center of the net. The tide level is very important when beach seining. If they are too high, one cannot wade through. Another thing dependent on the tide level is the amount of fish present. The lower the tide, the larger the fish population. Even though the best months to beach seine are June and July, Mark and Dad are hoping for a successful catch on this day in near winter. This process is performed 2 or 3 times a week at Norrie Point during the summertime. Children are encouraged to assist in the operation, so to get a better understanding of the river. Other methods of catching fish also are demonstrated at Norrie Point, such as gill netting and fish trapping. However, Mark says beach seining is the simplest and shows immediate results.
My name is Chris Bowser, and among other things, I'm the education coordinator here at the Norrie Point Environmental Center, which is the home of the National Estuarine Research Reserve for Hudson River. And today is our annual open house called Science on the River. This is a chance for anybody, families, individuals, students, young and old, to come down to Norrie Point here in lovely Staatsburg, New York, and find out about the Hudson River firsthand from expert scientists. We've got different displays that are set up that people can go to. They can learn about the river firsthand with not just their eyes, but their hands and their feet, do some canoeing, do some fishing, do some experiments, really get to know the river from the people who know it best. What we're trying to do here at Norrie Point is give everyone the tools they need to make the Hudson River a better home for all of us. That means giving students the knowledge and the inspiration that gets them started on a lifetime of learning. It also means working with municipal leaders and engineers and professionals on some of the cutting-edge issues that are on the Hudson River so that there's real progress made in issues like shoreline development, invasive species, fisheries. So we're trying to give everybody the tools that they need wherever they are in their trajectory with the Hudson River. We're trying to give them the tools to experience the river in a better way.
And how have you seen Norrie Point change over the last few decades?
Well, I've only worked here for about 6 years, but I can tell you that Norrie Point, the building here at Norrie Point, was originally one of the early civilian conservation corps projects that were part of President Franklin Roosevelt's attempts to sort of stimulate the economy and get people back to work after the Great Depression. So this very building was built in the sense, right here on the Hudson River, in a sense of a new hope on what this river might mean and what the new economy might mean.
Mm-hmm.
So since that time, it's been a restaurant, it's been classroom, it's been laboratory space, and now it's both a research facility, but it's also a place where anybody can come and learn more about the Hudson River, and that can be on a casual weekend day, or that can be through an organized school program. So there's a little something for everybody here at Norrie Point now. Well, we're here with Tom Lake, premier naturalist for the Hudson River Estuary Program. Tom, I've got a couple questions for you about fish in the Hudson River. Tell us a little bit about the fish diversity of the Hudson River.
Fish diversity in Hudson River. Well, we have documented 219 species of fish, and those range from, and this is in the watershed. And the watershed ranges from the Atlantic Ocean to the high peaks of the Adirondacks, well out the Mohawk River, and within the confines of almost 13,400 square miles, we have found 219 species of fish. There's every reason to believe there are some out there that we've just never documented. We haven't been fortunate enough to find them, or when we have found them, we didn't realize what we had found. But these fish range from saltwater fish to purely freshwater fish to a whole bunch of fish that kind of fit in between. They're equally at home in fresh saltwater or almost anything in between.
Do you happen to have a favorite fish of your own?
Favorite fish of my own? Well, I've got a lot of favorite fish. I would never presume to narrow it down. Every time I think about that, I think of some of these more exotic fish we find in the river seasonally that come in from the ocean that may have come from tropic waters, like the Crevel jack, the Atlantic needlefish, which kind of become established here, the inshore lizardfish, some of the more exotic species that you might not consider. I guess most people might answer that question with striped bass or American shad or sturgeon. But I have a great respect for some of the smaller, lesser-known fish in the Hudson River.
Nice. You've been working on the Hudson River for years.
I have.
In terms of fish populations, have you noticed any changes in all that time, big or little changes?
You know, one of the ways that we measure the Hudson River is primarily how we interact with it ourselves, whether we can eat the fish, whether we can swim in the water, all those things. And we tend to use that measure as a measure of how well the river's doing. Sure. A lot of the things we've done to the Hudson River are invisible to the fish that are in there. Fish populations rise and fall for reasons that are not always, you know, laid back to us, or cause and effect. Just natural cycles of abundance and scarcity, whether it's herring, whether it's shad, whether it's sturgeon, whether it's striped bass. We see these, and most of them, I think, are natural fluctuations in the populations, or, you know, we can usually figure out what it is. Now, there are occasions, in fact, more and more, when overharvesting of species leads to a reduction in certain populations. But on average, the Hudson River and the fish that live in it have been fairly stable, at least in my lifetime.
Related to that, if you had a crystal ball, what would you say is the future regarding recreational fishing on the Hudson?
Recreational fishing on the Hudson River. Well, one of the things that I think is going to happen, it's been happening, I think it can only get better, is as the state, the DEC, works very hard to stabilize the estuary. You know, we talk about estuaries being very dynamic, that conditions can change constantly. It's one of the hallmarks of an estuary. This river, in post-colonial times, up until the Industrial Revolution, and even after that, has become volatile, and the changes are so rapid that it's hard to predict something like that. But getting back to my original answer was that I think the river is going to become, within the confines of what an estuary can be, a lot more stable, and with that will come more predictability of where fish are, where fish can survive, and I think the populations of game fish, in this case, are certainly going to appreciate the increased stability within the confines of as stable as you can make an estuary.
Now, you're the Hudson River naturalist and a wonderful educator. What do you like most about your job?
Good question. Well, for one thing, I like getting in the river. I don't wear hip boots or chest waders. You may have noticed that. I like to wear a bathing suit as early in the season and late in the season as I can, because I like to be in the water, but that's just me. But it's working with young students. I never call them children or kids. They're really students. And working with them and watching their knowledge grow, because what we're doing as educators is creating the next constituency for the Hudson Valley and the Hudson River. And in my time on the river, one of the biggest drawbacks or problems I have found is people people's perception of the value of the Hudson River. My generation, many people my generation, still think of the Hudson River as terribly polluted. Can't eat the fish, don't drink the water, don't even go swimming. And it's up to us to turn that around and educate the students and the adults of tomorrow that it's getting better and it's not even true.
Right on. Thank you, Tom.
You're very welcome, Chris.
Much appreciated.
Got it.
We're here today at the Norrie Point Environmental Center in Staatsburg, Dutchess County, New York, on the banks of the beautiful Hudson River. And we're joined by a special guest. This is Betsy Blair. She's the manager of the Hudson River National Estuarine Research Reserve. Hi, Betsy.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. So, Betsy, what is the Hudson River Research Reserve?
The Research Reserve is a program that's dedicated to improving the Hudson River estuary, the health of its habitats through research, environmental monitoring, stewardship of the lands and waters that are at the 4 reserve sites, education to all kinds of audiences at public festivals like the one that we're holding today, as well as formal education programs, and training and outreach to decision makers and communities who are making important decisions every day about things that make a difference to our river habitats and to the life that lives in the river. So we're trying to make a difference through these linked programs and through our activities at 4 very special sites that span the middle 100 miles of the Hudson River, and that are tidal wetlands and public access sites, and where people come to fish, and some of them to hunt, a lot of them to hike.
When you can you give us an example of one of the projects that the Research Reserve has worked on?
Sure. One of the things that we've been working on is trying to understand how the habitats of the Hudson have been changing, and so we've been working with the Hudson River Estuary Program has underwritten the mapping of all of the Hudson's tidal habitats, all of its tidal wetlands, all of its submerged aquatic vegetation beds, like the underwater beds that you would see out here if it weren't so muddy from Tropical Storm Irene. They're there, they're just not visible right now. And we have about 13,000 acres of tidal wetlands and these submerged habitat beds, submerged aquatic vegetation beds, that are really important in the ecosystem. And so one of the projects we've been doing is partnering with Cornell University and New York Sea Grant and the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies, and mapping these sites every 5 years to see how they're changing and whether they're growing in extent or decreasing. And so we're beginning to establish some patterns along the estuary. And so that's one example of a project.
Very cool. Speaking of patterns and change, you've lived and worked along the Hudson River for a while. In the time that you've been here, what are some of the changes, either for good or not, that you've seen along the Hudson River? Anything that's notable to you personally or professionally?
Well, one thing that jumps right out is that we have a lot more people on the water in the river. We have a lot more people paddling and hiking, and that's because a lot of organizations, a lot of people have been very dedicated to improving public access, to building trails, to teaching people how to kayak and how to fish. And so we have a community, a set of communities along the Hudson that are really enjoying their river, either being on boats or being on the shore looking out, or all kinds of ways to enjoy it.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Betsy. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.
Mr. Bowser.
All right. It's September 8th, 2011, and for the last week and a half, the entire Hudson River Valley has been hammered by the rain and storms of both Hurricane Irene and Hurricane Lee. And the Hudson River is showing the effects. The Hudson River is an estuary, meaning that it has high tides and low tides. We're here at high tide. On any average day, this would be a very, very high tide. But this isn't even the highest water we've seen here. On the Sunday after Hurricane Irene blew through, the waters, because of that storm surge and the lunar high tide, were above this first rail right here. You can actually see all the weeds that were caught up on this rail. Imagine this water was another 4.5 feet higher than it is right now. So that storm surge that came ripping down through the tributaries of the whole entire Hudson River watershed really brought the water levels to incredibly high levels here on the Hudson River. And that has an effect, and we can see that effects in the Hudson River itself. When we look out at the river, on a day like today, the river looks particularly brown. There's a tremendous amount of debris, wood, logs, weeds that have been washed down from all of the tributaries within the watershed. Along with that debris comes a tremendous amount of sediments, this reddish brown mud that basically drifts through the water and gives it that brownish color. We measure something called turbidity, which is the amount of particles like sediments that are suspended in the water column. And one of the ways that we can measure turbidity is using something called a turbidity tube. The way this works is the bottom of this tube is what's called a Secchi disc, this black and white disc that's very easy to see if there's not a lot of turbid water blocking it. If I fill this tube up and look down, I can start to let water out through this valve here. As soon as I can see that black and white Secchi disc, I stop letting water out, and it'll give me a relative reading on water clarity or turbidity. Sometimes the water here at Norrie Point is so clear that we can see that black and white disc through about 70 or 80 or even 90 centimeters of water. On days that are a little bit more turbid here, it might be 40 or 50 centimeters. But today, when we filled this up and dropped it, we could only see through about 8 centimeters of water. One of the most turbid readings that I've ever seen here at Norrie Point. So you can see there is a lot of sediment and suspended particles here in the Hudson River. That means that underwater plants are going to have a hard time getting enough sunlight to photosynthesize. That means that fish or the birds that prey on them may have a hard time finding their prey and foraging for food. That's also evidence, though, of what's going on not just in the Hudson River, but upstream. And as you look behind me, you might see amongst all the clearing clouds some of the purple peaks of the Catskill Mountains. And many communities in the Catskills are still suffering from those incredible amounts of rain that have washed out entire roads and streets and bridges. The Esopus Creek, which runs through the Catskills, reached flood stage last night, and there was still more rain on top of that. So the communities that are in the watershed, they are seeing the effects of Hurricane Irene and the storms of Hurricane Lee, as is the Hudson River itself. So we're going to be talking about and dealing with the effects of storm surge and heavy rainfall for a long, long time.
Well, that's our show. We hope you enjoyed it. Join us next time as we examine species of fish, visit historic sites, and explore all that the Hudson River Valley has to offer. See you next time on Return to the River.